We thank the listeners who've already registered on our channel and invite new ones to subscribe for free as well.
It is great to be back.
You know, when we usually sit down to talk about a nation's history, we tend to look at the same things. We look at maps, treaties, we analyze wars.
The standard historical playbook, right?
Exactly. But today, we're doing something, well, completely different. We're going to explore the history of a nation through its ears.
That's a great way to put it.
We're talking about Israel, and specifically the incredible high-energy evolution of its musical world. I was reading up on this, and one thing that just jumped out at me was the reputation of the audience.
Oh, yes. The Israeli concertgoer. They're a phenomenon in themselves.
That's what I've heard. World-renowned soloists talk about this. They say performing in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. It's just not like performing in London or Vienna.
Not at all.
The audience isn't just sitting there, passively. They're part of it. There's an intensity, an enthusiasm that's almost aggressive, but in a good way.
A very visceral engagement. And to really get where that comes from and how this tiny nation became such a musical powerhouse, we're leaning on some really comprehensive work.
Right, and we should give credit where it's due right at the top. This deep dive is based on the fantastic research of historian and Professor Reuven Feingold from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Professor Feingold's work is just masterful. He maps this whole journey for us. I mean, from these scrappy amateur beginnings all the way up to the polished reality TV stars we see today.
It's a fascinating story, and it seems like our mission today is to track that evolution. How does a country go from basically zero musical infrastructure to exporting world-class musicians?
To do that, we have to start back in the 1930s, the foundations.
Okay, so post-World War I, what was the cultural life like in what was then British Mandate Palestine?
It was. Well, enthusiastic is a good word, but maybe lacking a bit of a professional polish.
So amateur.
Very much so. You had people trying to form choirs, attempting an opera here and there. But these were pioneers. I mean, they were draining swamps by day. They didn't have 6 hours to practice their scales.
Of course not. But then something happened that changed everything. A geopolitical tragedy.
A recurring theme in this story, unfortunately. In the 1930s, the rise of Nazism in Europe forced a massive, massive displacement of people.
And among those fleeing were some of the best musical minds on the continent.
It was a tragic reason for an influx, but for the local culture, it was completely transformative. You had thousands of top-tier musicians, teachers, composers, all fleeing the horrors in Europe and arriving in the region.
People trained in the great conservatories of Berlin, Warsaw, Budapest.
Exactly. And this leads us straight to the first huge milestone, the Philharmonic.
A Palestine Philharmonic, which we now know as the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra.
And this was the brainchild of one man, really, Bronislaw Huberman.
He was a Polish-Jewish violinist, a virtuoso.
A visionary. He saw the storm clouds gathering over Europe, and he realized he could do two things at once: save lives and build a world-class cultural institution. So he started recruiting the best Jewish musicians he could find.
The story of their very first concert is just there. It's unbelievable. It says everything about that time.
It really does. So the year is 1936.
Right in the middle of the Arab Revolt.
Right. So the security situation was terrible. There were attacks, ambushes, constant unrest. And yet, in the middle of all this chaos, in Tel Aviv, the orchestra holds its debut.
And the conductor they got.
None other than Arturo Toscanini, the legend himself.
Wow. And he wasn't Jewish.
No, but he was a fierce anti-fascist. He traveled into what was essentially a war zone to conduct this orchestra of refugees. It was a huge statement against what was happening in Europe.
It sent a message that culture isn't a luxury, it's essential, especially in dark times.
And that orchestra, almost overnight, became one of the best in the world. But it wasn't just this one elite group. The musical roots spread deeper.
The research also mentions the radio orchestra,
which became the Jerusalem Symphony, crucial for getting music out to the masses. But for me, the most unique thing from that era was the kibbutz orchestra.
This is my favorite part. An orchestra made up of farmers.
It sounds totally improbable, doesn't it? But yes, members of the collective farms, the kibbutzim, they formed their own orchestra. These are people milking cows and harvesting crops.
And then playing Beethoven in the evening.
At a very high level, too. It just shows you how deeply music was becoming embedded in the society. It spread quickly to other cities, too. Haifa, Netanya, Holon, Rishon LeZion.
So that was the first great wave, the European refugees. But then you fast forward about 60 years, and history kind of repeats itself.
It does. The 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Another massive wave of immigration.
Unprecedented. Over 1 million people. And within that wave were thousands and thousands of highly trained professional musicians, singers, teachers.
I read that in some places the ratio of piano teachers to students became almost 1-to-1.
It was an injection of talent most countries can only dream of. Suddenly, a community center in some small town had a violin instructor with a PhD from the Moscow Conservatory.
And that, naturally, led to a boom in new groups.
Absolutely. The study mentions groups like the Kamerata Rehovot, even the IDM had a chamber orchestra. It just raised the technical standard across the entire country.
Okay, so you have all these musicians. They need places to play. And the venues in Israel are interesting.
A very cool mix of ancient and modern.
You can actually see a concert in a Roman ruin.
You can. The Roman amphitheaters in Caesarea and Beit Shean, imagine that. Sitting in a stone theater that's 2,000 years old, listening to a symphony.
And the acoustics are good.
Surprisingly good. But then you also have the modern halls, like the Mann Auditorium in Tel Aviv. World-class acoustic spaces.
And the big festivals and competitions.
Yes, the Israel Festival in Jerusalem every spring, and major competitions like the Artur Rubinstein Piano Competition. They draw talent from all over the world.
So we have the players, we have the places, but I want to get to the music itself. Because when you transplant a bunch of European musicians to the Middle East, the sound is bound to change, right?
That is the central artistic question of this whole story, the search for a uniquely Israeli sound.
Which Professor Feingold calls the Mediterranean style.
Exactly. It was a very conscious effort to create something new. And the research breaks down the composers who did this into 3 distinct generations.
Okay, let's start with the first generation, the founders.
These are the ones who came from Europe. Men like Paul Ben-Haim, Odin Partos, Yosef Tal. They were trained in the European tradition, but when they arrived, they were just dazzled by the light and the sounds of the East.
So they started blending the two.
They did. Ben-Haim fused Western structures with the Eastern melodies. Partos focused on folklore. Yosef Tal was actually a pioneer in electronic music, way ahead of his time. And Mordecai Cedar.
He used Yemenite rhythms.
That's right. He integrated those complex, syncopated beats. It was a true synthesis.
Then came the second generation, the disciples.
Right. Composers like Eliyahu Inbal, Noam Sheriff, they took a slightly different path. They were fascinated by the Hebrew language itself.
How does that work? How do you make music sound like a language?
They studied the intonation, the rhythm, the natural stress of spoken Hebrew and of Jewish liturgy. The music they wrote tried to capture that feeling.
And the third generation, the moderns.
By the time they come along, the country is more established. They don't feel that same pressure to, invent a national style.
So they look outward. They're more global.
More global and also more willing to tackle difficult subjects. They address the Holocaust, which the earlier generation often found too painful to touch musically, and they start mixing genres classical with pop with rock.
It sounds like a sign of cultural confidence.
It absolutely is, and this is all propped up by a huge educational system. Over 200 music conservatories in a country the size of New Jersey.
That's an incredible number. But let's move out of the concert hall. We need to talk about the music of the people, the soundtrack of the nation.
Ah, yes. Shir Ivri, the Hebrew song.
The source makes a really important distinction here. There isn't just any song that happens to be in Hebrew.
No, it's a specific category. You could think of Shir Ivri as a kind of secular prayer book. The songs aren't just about love and dancing. They're about the nation's values, its landscapes, its wars, its hopes.
And the musical influences are a mix.
A total melting pot. You can hear the sad, minor key Russian melodies from the early pioneers, but they're blended with Arabic scales and Yemenite traditions.
And in this genre, there's one name that stands above all others.
Naomi Shemer, the first lady of Israeli song. Her songs are they're woven into the fabric of the country.
Most famously, Jerusalem of Gold.
Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. She wrote it in 1967, and it became an instant anthem. But she also had this amazing connection to the Beatles.
Right. Lihi.
Yes. It was 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, a very dark time. She heard Let It Be, and she took that melody but wrote new Hebrew lyrics, Lihi, may it be. It became this powerful song of hope.
It's incredible how she repurposed a global pop hit into something so deeply national. And this culture of singing brings us to Shira Betzeber.
Public sing-alongs. This is something that's really hard to explain to outsiders.
It's not a choir, it's not karaoke.
No, it's just people gathering together around a campfire in a giant concert hall to sing these old songs together. The audience is the show.
It sounds very powerful.
It is. It's about nostalgia, patriotism, remembering the past, a feeling of community. And the singer who really embodies that spirit is Yehoram Gaon. He's a true cultural icon.
I love that. But the Israeli music scene today isn't just nostalgic sing-alongs, it's incredibly modern.
Oh, it's a vibrant, chaotic, wonderful mix.
Let's talk about hip-hop. I was surprised to see how much of it is driven by political satire.
It's a huge part of it. Take the band Hadag Nahash, their song The Sticker Song, or Sharat Hasticker.
And the lyrics were written by a famous novelist, David Grossman.
Yes. The concept is genius. He just took all the conflicting bumper stickers you see on cars in Israel, from the political left, the right, the religious, the secular.
And just listed them.
He just wraps them one after another. And the result is this funny, angry, ironic portrait of a society arguing with itself. It's brilliant.
So clever. And then you have the fusion artists.
The Iden Rachel project is the perfect example. Iden Rachel took the unique musical traditions of the Ethiopian Jewish community and blended them with Middle Eastern sounds and modern pop.
And it was a massive hit.
A global sensation. It showed the Israeli sound was still evolving, still absorbing new influences. And you see that with rock bands like T-Pax and Machina and artists like Noah or Akanoa Mini.
And finally, we have to talk about the machine that creates today's stars. Reality TV.
It's the new pipeline. The biggest pop stars are coming from these TV contests.
First, there was Kokev Nolad, A Star is Born.
Ran for 10 seasons. It was a national obsession. The very first winner, Ninette Tayeb, went from being an unknown soldier to a huge rock star overnight.
And the list of winners just kept coming. Hira Moyal, Boaz Mata.
Roni Delumi, Diana Golby. Year after year, it produced major talent.
Then that show was replaced by Hakokav Haba, the next star.
And that one became even more important because it was linked directly to the Eurovision Song Contest.
Which gave us a huge international pop moment.
Neda Barzilai. She won the show in 2017, and then she won all of Eurovision in 2018.
With the vocal looper and the chicken noises.
It was bold, it was different, and it totally worked. And she's not the only one. That show produced a ton of stars, like Nadav Gej, Eden Laline, Tamir Grimberg. It shows the talent pool is just incredibly deep.
It's an amazing arc. From refugees in the 1930s clutching violins to Neda Barzilai on a global stage.
It really is a journey from survival to thriving. For such a small country, its musical output, both classical and popular, is just immense.
We've covered a lot, but for listeners who want to go deeper, Professor Feingold's work points to some great resources. What would you recommend?
Well, the book Popular Music and National Culture in Israel by Mati Regev and Edwin Sarusi is essential.
Okay.
And for Naomi Shemer, there's a great biography called Naomi Shemer, First Lady of Israeli Song. The Jewish Virtual Library is also a fantastic resource. And the Embassy of Israel's Cultural Department has a lot of detailed information online.
That's a great reading list.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating journey.
It really has.
Thank you very much for having been with us. Do not forget to subscribe for free to the channel. And from now on, we invite you to follow the next episode.